I'm waiting.
And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very, very high above all the puerile and mendacious forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. There has been a ton happening in the Wyoming media over the weekend, some of which we'll get to, some of which we may not, some of which, we'll just completely ignore. I guess it'll come down to what our guest, Representative Tom Kelly, wants to do. But joining us in the studio is none other than Representative Tom Kelly. Tom, welcome to the show.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. This is a fine rainy morning. We always love that in Wyoming, especially in the springtime. And I'm getting myself ready to flush out my mind of all those things bothering me today before I go into recalibration this week.
Oh, how much fun is that going to be?
I have no idea, but all I know is when House leadership asked me to do it, they're all kind of rubbing their foreheads about it. We're not looking forward to it when you have a ridiculous court order mandating that we have to hire security and buy laptops for every kid at the same time that we finally did a significant reduction to property taxes. So I've said before, they're probably putting the new guy on the team. So when everything goes to hell, they can blame me.
Right. So what are you guys doing about this court ruling? Are you appealing it, or what's going on?
The last I'd heard was the Gordon administration is appealing it. I don't know on the basis of what. I haven't looked into it, but I think our first meeting is going to be going through the actual court documents. And I have to tell the public this one will not be publicly televised because there's something about an attorney-client privilege because there's a court case here that's being appealed. So, but we need to know the background of everything in the court case before we start digging into what we're doing with recalibration. So that's where it stands right now. I don't know what I don't know yet. I will know what I don't know by the end of the week.
Fair enough. The whole thing confuses me because we do spend, if not more, pretty close to the top per student in the entire country. Last time I checked, it was like right around 20 grand a student, which was pretty well near the top. And this judge is saying, well, we don't spend enough. Well, my question is, how much is enough? How do you determine what enough is?
Well, funny you should ask, because that's part of what recalibration is, determining how we fund the schools, not so much how much, but how much we fund the schools. And it's not a spending idea. We don't tell the school districts how to spend that money. There's a block grant, and we say, this is the rationale behind the size of the grant. This is how much you need to hire quality teachers. This is what you need to have the correct facilities. The school building's a different fund, but I don't know, but I did see this because I've been meeting with superintendents in the area and to get their idea on it. And I saw that Sheridan District 2, I have to give a shout out to them. The average spending per county is about 20,000. It's over 20,000 now. and District 2 is about 16,000. So they're running at like 20% less than the state average and have some of the best results in the state. So I would love for people to go into that courtroom with the judge and say, look, the best district in the state is running 20% less expensive than the state in general. And I'm not talking about the outliers. You got like Claremont is obviously one of the most expensive districts because it's very small.
Well, and they're like way out in the boonies.
And you have no economy of scale whatsoever like you do. So I'm not even comparing Sheridan County 2 to like Natrona or larger counties. Comparing it to similar sized counties, it's still spending significantly less for better results.
Agent 29, Lou Grant. Go ahead, Lou.
I want to go back to the block grant because that's one of the things you guys can change. Right?
Mr. Silo, here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go.
And yeah, we don't want top-down manipulation. That's one of the things that District 2 here is particularly opposed to. And frankly, if everybody operated like them, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But we would determine that we're going to give a raise to the teachers. And so we would do an ESA and put that out there and say, okay, now rather than specifying to each district how they had to spend that money, we'd give them the block grant. And guess what? The teachers didn't get their raise.
No, of course not.
But the administrators did.
Well, and that therein lies the big problem. And maybe not. And let's just be fair. Say, okay, so let's say a school district did not give administrators a raise, but look at Sheridan County as a whole. In Sheridan County, there are 3 school districts, which means you have 3 superintendents and 3 superintendent staff. So, a tremendous amount of money is spent on overhead. And when you compare Sheridan County to, say, Natrona County has 1 school district, and they have 2 big high schools. And I don't know how many, elementary schools, but it's got to be a lot. I mean, compared to Sheridan, Casper, Natrona County is pretty big. So there's no reason why we couldn't have just 1 school district. So I think that, a lot of the spending really comes down to how you run your administration. Here's the other thing that I wanted to bring up. If you compare Wyoming to South Dakota spends significantly less per student. And I mean, I don't even I looked at it maybe a year and a half ago, and we're talking thousands of dollars difference. But their student achievement, their test scores is higher than Wyoming. So how is that possible, Tom? How can we spend less and have better educated students?
Well, it's one of the fun things we'll be looking at in recalibration. Coming to my mind were actually Idaho and Utah, which literally spend less than less than half, 9,000 to 10,000, both of them per student. And I can't remember which one. One of them is on par with Wyoming, and the other one's slightly better. So it's a complete myth. The judge is completely misinformed that spending more means better results. It means more equity. No, you're right. There's got to be a way. And Agent 29 here is also correct.
Lou Grant is his name.
Okay.
The grouchy producer.
29 Grant. Look, he's almost smiling now. Look at that. If you had dimples, they'd be showing. We need to find a way to make sure that we are recruiting the best and the brightest teachers to come here, because education ultimately depends on how good of an educator you have. It doesn't matter if you have the newest bells and whistles and the best software and the newest computers for every kid, and you've got really caring mental health professionals, and you've got a big burly SRO officer. Those are all nice things to have in a school that make things easier for the teachers and the students. But ultimately, you need good teachers, and you cannot get good teachers if you pay them about what you can make stocking shelves at Walmart.
Exactly right. Now, while that conversation is interesting, the real reason why I wanted to have you on the show is I have a bone to pick with Representative Kelly.
Oh, I've been ambushed.
You have been ambushed. It seems, and maybe the public is being led to believe this, but I don't know. It seems that you have crawled into bed with Tyler Lindholm. How dare you? Has anybody told your wife?
Where the hell did we get our bed from that we both fit in it?
I don't know. I'm pretty tall bed, pretty long bed. I mean,
yeah, we're both long, thin drinks of water.
All jesting aside.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Tell everybody here about you just ambushed a 3rd-degree black belt. Let's watch what happens.
Hey man, I'm not scared of you. Maybe I should be after the show. Well, anyway, a flyer was sent out, allegedly, ostensibly, on behalf of Representative Tom. There it is. Yeah, we got it up on the screen. But it is definitely from Americans for Prosperity.
Thank you, Holly Jennings. That's a nice shot you took.
Yeah, I mean, great picture of you. This is also the group that President Trump has labeled Americans for No Prosperity, which is generally what they're about. They're a libertarian organization, and in this past election, it was Americans for Prosperity that supported the Redcoats, like all of them. And just to give you an example of how much money they spent, and it's really hard to figure out how much you spend on these flyers because you really don't know for sure, but you can take a guess. And in the Senate 22 race, Americans for Prosperity, by my numbers, again, not exact, just a swag guess, I think they spent around $80,000 defeating Mark Jennings. So tremendous amount of money in this past election. And now, Tom, they're supporting you. What's going on there?
Well, you could just say they sent me a thank you card publicly to everybody. I don't know. There's been a lot of speculation on it, but let's go from my perspective about how I found out about this. I went over to my 91-year-old father lives here in Sheridan, and he's what you call a super ager. He still lives on his own. He drives, he does his own bills.
Right.
And he comes in with the mail and he throws down an AFP card, and he looks at me and he says, "I thought you said this guy Beitman was a good guy."
Yeah, I got one of those.
And I said, "He is." And oh my, I'm like, I don't know what that's about. I'm like, I'm just, thank God that's not my face on there. And little did I know, already in my mailbox was that card you showed the viewers at that point. So my reaction to it being a negative thing was that in the primaries, AFP was known for supporting candidates that were largely supported by Mark Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
When we came to the nasty mailer wars, it was basically the Freedom Caucus versus AFP.
Absolutely, it was.
And the Freedom Caucus was backing me, and AFP was not. They just ignored me during the primaries. There were no attack mailers against me. There was nothing supporting me. They just outright ignored me. But I was campaigning with former Representative Mark Jennings, and we were campaigning as a team. We even sent out our mailers together with both of our smiling faces on it. So I considered it an attack on Mark Jennings was also an attack on me, since I was running side by side with him and we were promoting each other's material on that. Then this comes out with, thank you for your vote on ESAs. And for me, it seemed instantly dubious because 50 something representatives voted for ESAs and they didn't send out cards for everybody. I mean, did one go out for Ocean Andrew?
No, I don't think. Maybe,
but it was his bill. He was the one who pushed that through, and it was his baby he carried for years. He was the guy who got me on board into the education committee. He carried most of the water for that bill. So if you're going to thank any representative for getting that through, he would be the guy. I sat down, had lunch with Representative Bratton yesterday. We were going over some things about schools. I said, "You supported ESAs. Did they send a mailer out with your face on it?" Nope. So all we can do is speculate. And of course, people come from all parts of the spectrum on it. Some say they've painted a target on you. They want you to lose. So this is their kiss of death. So nobody likes you because your face is next to AFP. And I don't find that convincing, because I would doubt a group like Americans for Prosperity or Tyler Lindholm himself would go out there with the attitude, people hate us, so if we want people to lose, let's slap their face on our name. There's no way they would approach things that they saw themselves as the kiss of death. Well, I would say it has more to do, you said, a libertarian group, right? And as they were backing people who were far from libertarian in some cases, it became the Princess Bride joke. They keep on using that word, but I don't think it means what they think it means. So what do? You slap on the face of an actual libertarian next to your name. Maybe rebranding. Maybe they're reaching out to me because after they saw the fact that I do have a libertarian streak, that they thought I was somebody they could work with, or who knows? The most I ever spoke to AFP was a conversation with Tyler about how I'm an inch or two taller than him in the hallway. That was
which is shocking in and of itself. I mean, Tyler Lindholm's a pretty tall guy, but you brought up something that I don't think is entirely outside of the box. I think that Tyler Lindholm is not a dumb guy. I think that
not at all.
No, I think that he's pretty smart, and I think that he's pretty capable of determining the political calculus surrounding this whole thing. And when we come back, I want to talk about that because I think that it's a interesting argument. I think it's maybe a valid one, but we'll talk about it when we come back. And then coming up at the bottom of the hour, I have a great video. It's fun, it's new, it's different with Rebecca Bextel and Nina Weber from the lawn of the White House. It's fun. They were at the Easter egg roll, and we'll do that when we come back.
Here at U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics. I'm David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. You know, that's a number that the mainstream media they just shouldn't even try. Well, you know, good for me. They don't, because pretty much everything they put out is bullcrap. Well, joining me for the program today is Representative Tom Kelly. So, Tom, before the break, we were talking about this flyer that was sent out on your behalf. And call it a fringe theory, call it a, conspiratorial political argument. But I've heard some people say, well, Tyler Lindholm is not a dumb guy. I think he's actually pretty smart. And, he realizes that in some districts around the state that Americans for Prosperity is kind of toxic, and that they put out a lot of mailers. So do you think that, and you mentioned that you campaigned with Mark Jennings in the last election, and I don't know how many mailings they did against Mark, but it was a ton. And all of them were pretty caustic. Accused him of being a liar and an environmentalist and a whole bunch of different things. Well, do you think that there's any credibility to the argument that, well, Tyler knows the calculus here, and while it may help you in some areas, that this mailer would be more damaging to you politically than if he didn't do anything at all. You buy that?
Well, let's evaluate that critically. First of all, what would the result be? What if that worked? What if I got primaried and one of the real candidates won?
I'd love to see which one they'll find in Sheridan
Well,
County.
think about that for a second, because if that happened and confirm that theory, then their name is now permanently toxic.
Yeah,
That they become
worse than it already
the
is.
endorsement. It become like the WEA. It's the endorsement you don't want. And I don't. And like you said, Tyler he's not pretty smart. He's highly intelligent. He's very politically savvy. He's well spoken. He knows what he's doing. And there's no way that a guy with that intellect and that type of political knowledge
Joining me from
would be so short-sighted to try and burn their name down just to take down one candidate who it's more likely they actually probably liked my voting record.
I'm sure they did, yeah.
Versus, just hating me so much they had to get rid of me. And the other one would be this. They supported Senator Craigo
Yeah.
very strongly, and he won handily.
Mm-hmm.
So that also undermines the kiss of death theory too.
Yeah, I don't really buy into that. When I first saw your flyer, I thought, okay, well, they just like his voting record, because really in your district, I mean, I don't see that, it would really have all that much effect. Maybe that might work in some other places. There was a lot of AFP advertising in Casper that was pretty caustic, but up here, I don't really buy that argument. But you get online and and maybe this is something we should talk about. So I've got a piece that I want to get your opinion on. But the political, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but the tenor of politics online tends to be a little bit crazy. So, for example, on Monday I published an episode called "Because I'm a White Man," and that was my experience down at the protest on Saturday. And the comments on it are way, way, way extreme. Either you love me or you hate me. So, I tend to think that maybe this theory that, AFP knows that it's the kiss of death, and so they'll get Tom unelected. I really don't buy into that at all.
I'm amazed how pessimistic so many people have gotten on so many levels. And especially people who are of a political stripe similar like to us, because we're supposed to be the ones who have great faith in self-governance, in liberty, in God. So what are we so angry about all the time? I see this constantly. I see an angry reaction to so many things, and a reaction, not somebody critically evaluating a situation and then becoming angry, which is what I'm more likely to do. Because when I saw like the flyer, when I saw it, I have more of like a what the heck moment.
Right.
And I'm like, I try to make sense of it before I react to it in any type of emotional way. But like we talked before, I am wired a little differently. I don't know. I see how caustic it is online. I was reading the comments. I commented online on that one because I was disappointed I didn't go.
It was fascinating, Tom.
Well, I listened to what you did. And you actually tried to have a discussion / debate with them. And they just got more and more angry. When I go to things like that, I don't say much. I tend to ask questions.
Just watch and see.
Well, no, I try to have ask questions and find out what they're thinking and why. And if they tell me something I know is untrue or they got wrong, I don't correct them on the spot, because I actually want to hear what they're thinking. And that shuts down being able to get any information out of a voter about where they're getting their information from, why they think the way they do. If you start getting into an argument about what does the word fascist mean or something like that, which there's another word that gets thrown around. I don't know what to do. All I can do as a representative is try to lead by example, because sometimes that attitude leaked into the House floor and it was really ugly. I was really disappointed to see that. We don't need to go as low as what's happened in the U.S. Congress.
No, and I try to be one of the more optimistic people, but I realize that in my program things get a little cynical sometimes.
But wait, you're supposed to have some fun too.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's just like, and I've got the same sense of humor. I just don't do it with voters online, and I don't do it on the House floor unless I'm making fun of myself.
All right. Well, we've got about 5 minutes before the bottom of the hour, and if you can stay for the whole program, that would be great. But
Oh, sure. I just got to pack my stuff up and head off to Cheyenne later. That's all.
Well, the longer we can keep you here, the better it's going to be for you. Well, yesterday, our pals Rebecca Bextel and Nina Weber were at the White House for the Easter egg roll, and so we thought it might be kind of fun to do a quick interview with them from the White House lawn. And here it is. Joining me from the White House is friend of the program and current candidate for Wyoming State GOP Chair Rebecca Bextel and Representative Nina Weber. Ladies, how are we doing?
Hello, David. Hello, Ken.
Hi, we're fantastic. The weather here is beautiful. A little humid, but absolutely fabulous.
Yes,
What are we doing at the White House?
we are here for the Easter egg roll. And I have to say, it's a wonderful event so far. Lots of families. I haven't seen a single transgender activist yet. It's just wholesome and just, it's a wonderful. Do you mind if I do a little pan around?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. So there behind us is the Washington Monument. And coming on around here. Hazel, can you say hello to Mr. Iverson?
Hi, Hazel.
We're here with my 7-year-old.
Awesome. So, so you're just going to take part in the Easter egg roll, or do you have anything planned after that?
Yes, we are going to just do the Easter egg roll, and we're going around and talking with people, and it's been a wonderful experience so far. How do you think, Nina?
I just think there's a bunch of great people here and lots of families. I can't even stress it. You know the thing that I like seeing? So many pregnant mamas.
Yes, everywhere.
I just love it. They're everywhere. And all these happy kids are just happy to be here, and everybody's having a really good time, and everybody's in really good spirits.
Awesome.
And again, I have not seen one transgender anything
Activist.
and everybody knows the boys look like boys, girls look like girls, and the Easter Bunny looks like the Easter Bunny.
That's awesome. So, as far as you know, are you the only two folks from Wyoming there, or are there some other people?
As far as I know, we probably are the only two people from Wyoming, but
Yes.
who knows? It's a really gigantic event.
How many people? How many people do you think are there?
Right at this moment, I'm going to say thousands. Yeah, but it's been going on like all day.
Wow, very, very cool. Well, I don't want to keep you from your festivities. Anything else you want to tell my audience before we let you get to the Easter egg roll?
Well, I just want to say this has just been a fabulous event. They are using real eggs, and just people are happy. It feels very patriotic. It's so tastefully done. This is an absolutely beautiful event, and I hope more people in Wyoming can attend it in the future.
All right.
What I would like to say is that the White House, I can tell you, is open for American families.
Absolutely.
When we come back from the program, I've got a piece that I want to talk with Tom about. It's all about free speech. Kind of goes to that subject we were visiting about before. The, all the rhetoric online. So we're going to talk about that next with Representative Tom Kelly. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Cowboy State Politics live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. And don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. I kind of am sometimes. Welcome back to the program. Joining us for the hour is Representative Tom Kelly. And Tom, I've got a piece here that I think that you're going to want to opine on. And it's kind of random, but let me just intro it for you. Of course, you're aware of the Joe Rogan podcast. I mean, pretty much everyone is, right? Well, he's got a couple of pals that he continues to have on that are allegedly, and I want to emphasize the word allegedly, anti-Israel and anti-Ukraine, which I'm totally with him on the whole anti-Ukraine business. But there's a piece in the New York Post this morning, and it's by a columnist named Douglas Murray, and it's called So-Called Israel-Hamas Ukraine War Experts Spew False Info on the Joe Rogan podcast, and there has to be a standard. Now, obviously, this guy is one of those that we got to fact check everybody. And but let me just read you a couple of paragraphs, and then we'll talk about it. Quote, I went back on the Joe Rogan podcast to talk about my new book on democracies and death cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization, which is available, blah, blah. I'm not going to pitch his book for him. I've been on Joe's podcast a number of times before and have always enjoyed it. Joe is a master of his art. And now a lot of people can talk casually, but interestingly for hours. And, I get that. His podcast is 3 hours long. Well, the problem that this guy has with Joe Rogan is one of his friends named Dave Smith. Now, Dave Smith, claiming some Jewish ancestry, has spent 18 months since October 7th being very unfunny indeed. Specifically, he has decided to spend his time going around the podcast world, sounding off about Israel. And in the process, he largely cites people like him, people who have many views, but no obvious experience. People like Daryl Cooper, who says he isn't a historian yet, but has been invited onto some of the world's biggest podcasts as a historian. One of Cooper's many ahistorical claims is that Winston Churchill was the chief villain of World War II. I don't know how that guy drew that conclusion, but anyway, one of these and many other occasions, Cooper has simply lied about history. So it goes on for about another 2 pages. But what I wanted to talk about with you, Tom, is there are a lot of podcasts. It seems like everybody's got one. I have 2 of them now. And everybody's got their own opinion. So I guess 2 questions for you. What do you think about this fact-checking thing? And secondly, if you're going to go on and I'll just make the argument that's in the piece, if you're going to go on the world's largest podcast and spew disinformation, should there be a way to deal with that?
Well, first, what do you mean fact-checking?
Any fact-checking. Like we're all get irritated about that crap on Facebook.
I thought maybe you meant like the official fact-checkers, which were nothing more than, is a form of censorship, is all that really was. It is incumbent upon American citizens to be informed and fact-check, because anyone can lie to you at any point, including well-versed historians that could have 12 degrees in history, and somebody like that could actually take advantage of being dishonest, because people say, well, that person must know they have all those degrees. I think fact-checking is incredibly important, and I think the way you deal with people and disinformation and who lie is more speech, not less. I mean, I've seen Hillary Clinton on TV talking about possible criminal charges for propaganda. Stupid. I'm like, now there's a fascist for people who want to use that word.
But I think that, you're right. But I would say that it is incumbent upon you to do your own fact checking. And then the other part of it is, if you're really worried about, whether or not somebody's telling you the truth, challenge them. That's why I went down to the protest this weekend, so I could say, all right, what do you believe? Hey, what about this? What about this argument? Do you really think that that's correct? So what I'm saying is, yeah, we need to do fact checking, but it's up to you to do it. If you're a fan of a show and you see or hear something that doesn't exactly ring true to you, go look it up, open a book, find out for yourself.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's incumbent upon every American citizen to do that. It makes me think of an article that was written recently about students who had their visas get revoked for whatever reason. I haven't looked into the exact details of it. And I was asked for a news article what I thought about it. Of course, I'm all for free speech, but what do you think about students getting their visa revoked? And I said, well, they signed an agreement. It's not a right to be in the country. It's a privilege. And if they violate those agreements, yeah, sure, it's fair game to kick them out. But what I also had said was, but as far as speech goes, when you have people literally chanting death to America in the middle of the streets, and they're supposed to be here as our guests, of course you can kick them out at that point. Well, the phrase death to America was not in the news article. And then I start getting emails from people who read the article saying, you think free speech is a threat to national security. No, that was never said.
No,
that was never said. But this is what people do. They hear somebody say something, and like whoever wrote this column about the Joe Rogan podcast, they just throw in their own bias in there and just come up with, first of all, to say somebody is lying. You're assuming they know what they're saying is untrue, because that's what lying is.
Yeah, lying's a pretty high standard.
So many of these so-called fact checkers or these experts, what they do is they just litter somebody else's opinion with their own spin on it, and they come up with this Frankenstein's monster that was never intended. Like me, the libertarian guy, to the point where AFP is a friend of mine now.
Yeah, by the way.
I'm a guy who suddenly thinks free speech is a threat to national security.
No.
Sure, that's like Mark Jennings being a radical environmentalist.
Exactly right. And, I don't think that free speech is a danger to anything. In fact, I've said numerous times on my program that when it comes to the First Amendment and free speech, the only right that you do have, really, is to be offended. If you don't have a right to be offended by something that somebody says, then we don't have free speech at all. And it's, the comment that, and it's at the end of this piece, but he's arguing that since Joe Rogan didn't challenge this guy, didn't correct him, that Joe Rogan is somehow complicit.
He's endorsing. He's endorsing what he's saying just because he listened to him.
Exactly.
Like me standing on a street corner listening to a leftist with an F Trump shirt on talk about what a fascist Trump is, and because I didn't challenge him, I must agree that Trump's a fascist.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous. In fact, that's a form of deception.
It is, and it's all this like anti-fascist, anti-racist stuff that. There's been a couple of books written about it, but generally speaking, the thesis is if you're not actively arguing against something, that you're implicitly endorsing it. Well, no, maybe I just think your argument's stupid and I don't want to respond to it.
Or you're just so dumbfounded by it, you've got nothing to say but wow.
Wow.
When people talk about liberty or freedom of speech being a bad thing, you guys have heard me say it before over the years, liberty is only dangerous to people who try to stifle it.
Absolutely. Yep. And, when it comes to free speech, it's, I believe in the free marketplace of ideas that, that all ideas are valid. I'm not saying all ideas are correct. I'm saying that everybody has a right to, say whatever on their mind, and that the more valid and the more powerful the argument will rise to the top. And then the crappy ones, like, there's lots of examples of these folks, will go down to the bottom.
In a free market.
In a free
market of ideas, the best ideas rise to the top.
Yep.
In an atmosphere of censorship in mainstream media and on social media, that's where we get these narratives of safe and effective, despite all the evidence to the contrary.
Exactly right. I couldn't have said it better. Well, let's see here. We've got about 20 minutes and we're a little early, so let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, I want to hit some of the headlines from the news. Apparently, President Trump had an Easter greeting. I think we could all opine on what he had to say. It's fun. We'll do it when we come back.
Probably on the same level of what he had to say about AFP.
It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell.
Iceland, France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Welcome back to the program. It's Cowboy State Politics on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble. I'm in the studio with a 3rd-degree black belt who I continually am trying to piss off. I know, not very good for my health, but fortunately, he's a friend of mine. Welcome back to the show. It's David Iverson sitting in the studio with Representative Tom Kelly.
Well, I have to correct that misinformation right there.
Well, you do a fact check for me.
Just putting forth the idea that a martial artist is a violent person. We are the least likely to attack anybody.
That's true. It's all self-defense. I may have said that.
Yeah, you've seen the Karate
They're
Kid.
like the concealed carry holders.
It's true.
Very
Exactly.
low crime rate.
Right. I mean, we have to put hand control on me because I have dangerous hands now. So you're going to suddenly just snap a neck.
Are your hands classified as deadly weapons?
I hope not, but they probably are in Illinois now.
Probably. Oh, by the way, so you do a lot of other stuff besides your political career down in Cheyenne. So you do teach martial arts classes,
yes,
right? And you're a professor, right?
Yes.
Well, why don't you tell my audience, where they can find you if they want to take a martial arts class or?
Oh, okay. AJF Martial Arts. It's a Taekwondo-based school, but it's a mixed martial art. We do stuff in there like jujitsu and judo and hapkido and basically the arts of folding clothes while people are still wearing them. Because Taekwondo is a lot of fun. It's athletic, but it's not a very good fighting style. It is good for somebody lanky like me. So we do that. I'm the University Department Head of Political Science, Public Administration, and Public Policy at American Military University. So I don't teach as much as I used to. My job is primarily the curriculum in the classroom, making sure we have factual, constitutionally sound, and objective content. And
so you're the fact checker.
At my university? Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm the fact checker. However, I do have somewhat of a democratic process with my professors. I've got professors from the left of Bernie Sanders.
What?
Yes. To the right of J.D. Vance.
No.
Yes, I do. And my goal is to have all of those professors teach so objectively that their students cannot guess how they voted in the last election. And I say, if your students know how you voted without Facebook stalking
You're
you,
screwing up.
you failed at your job. So that's what I do. I've been an instructor. I've been an educator my whole life. Thus, probably why they're sticking me on the recalibration committee.
That brings up an interesting point that I've heard from a lot of longtime legislators, some of whom are still in, some of them who are not in office anymore, and let me see it. Yeah, the quotation was, debate on the floor is dead. That the claim is that you used to be able to debate different topics on the floor of the House, and maybe you would change a mind here or there. But according to some of your colleagues and some former colleagues, that really that doesn't happen anymore. Did you, since I got two legislators
But wait,
here,
Harshman just said this year that I changed his mind on one of those.
so with
Yeah.
Harshman, debate is not dead. What do you think, Tom? Was debate dead on the floor?
Absolutely not. I had a representative come up to me who actually came up with an amendment for something, and I don't want to call anybody out right now because I never
It's
want to.
not really what you do.
I'd rather not, because sometimes things get misinterpreted and I don't want to step on anyone's toes needlessly. But he came up to me afterwards. He had an amendment to a bill and I spoke against it. And he came up to me later. He's like, you got me to vote against my own amendment. And he laughed about it. He's like, you were right. I was completely wrong. So we do have debate in there. Now, what happened at the beginning of the session? We've got a landslide of bills.
A ton.
Well, prior to going into the session, there was a lot of debate. There was a lot of discussion. Those were the most heavily vetted bills. The ones coming up in the 5 and dime, people had been fighting out over those for weeks before we came in. So our minds were largely made up. So the so-called debate you saw on the floor was all delay tactics and for show, because that's why we had our minds made up on the slew of bills that started off. After that, the bills with which we were not familiar, there's some great discussion and debate and back and forth in the House. So the idea that it's dead is ridiculous. But, I have heard other representatives say this, and I will concur. I think there were too many bills.
There were a lot.
And I think where the debate gets squashed where it shouldn't be is in the committees. That's where we should have fewer bills so we could dig more deeply into them.
So regarding this slew of bills, a lot of them were bills that had been run several times in the
Or
past.
they've been sitting on the shelf with dust because of leadership.
They had been in one place or another in the back rooms or the committee meetings, or they had been debated to death. And so the idea that came popularly out of the Senate and other places that these are not well vetted bills is absolutely ludicrous. You just don't like them.
Who writes the bills, guys?
Well, first of all, there were some bills that were brand new, but
Yeah.
those were not the ones that came out in the 5 and dime. And I was also speaking from a freshman legislator standpoint that the newbies, we had been debating these bills. We just started discussing them, some of them after the primaries. So
Exactly.
we've been talking about them since August of last year by the time we got there. Our minds were made up already.
Now, a lot of the bills that were killed in the Senate that were voted on overwhelmingly in the House of Representatives, the argument was used, well, this isn't ready for prime time. This is a poorly written bill. This bill is terrible. We can't pass this. Well, the folks that write the bills, that actually do the writing, is the Legislative Service Office. Now, they may, Ken, I've heard you say several times, well, you got a bill back and it wasn't entirely what you had written, and you had told them, no, take it back, write it the way I had it. But for the most part, when you submit a bill, it goes through the Legislative Service Office, and those are the folks that write the bill. So really, all of this business about it's not ready for prime time, it's poorly written, well, those are all coming out of LSO. So, it's, I think that's a bunch of bull crap.
Well, I would like to say that LSO, my viewpoint was that they are fairly objective and do the best they can to translate what a representative says into something that looks like legislation. So to be fair, sometimes people come to LSO with some vague ideas or some really bad ideas, and they do the best they can to craft a workable bill at that point. So I wouldn't lay it on LSO.
No. You're misinterpreting my argument.
Okay. Well, in case any listeners were, it's a good thing I said that anyway.
Fair enough. My argument is that whomever is claiming that it's a poorly written bill or it's not ready for prime time is not implicating the bill's author or the sponsor of it. Really, what they're saying is, hey, LSO didn't do a good job. And the truth is, it ends up being a bill that you just don't want to talk about because if it comes out of LSO, for the most part, I've seen them make some mistakes, but for the most part, it's consistent with law. It makes sense. You could pass it. It would work in most cases. And so what I'm saying is really that's absolutely an illegitimate argument.
Yeah, I don't buy that either. It sounds to me like a rationalization to try and kill a bill that
Exactly.
they don't. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
That
that's
comes
what I'm
out there, but
saying.
I can't speak against any specific senator. But I've got to say while I'm here, I've really and somebody like me had it up to here with House versus Senate, WIGO versus Gun Owners of America, AFP versus Freedom Caucus. So many people on the conservative side of the spectrum in circular firing squads, us versus them, tribal mentality. And I'm talking within the conservative wing
Oh, yeah.
of the Republican. Of course, there's a moderate conservative split. We saw that over and over in the votes in the House, but I'm talking about in that large conservative majority. We've got infighting in that. And anytime someone tries to drag me into that, all I could do is just roll my eyes and walk away from it.
Yeah, and I think that, anybody who is honest has to say, hey, there were some good things that came out of the Senate. There were some good things that came out of the House. And I would argue that there was probably some bad stuff that came out of
Ultimately, look what we
both
got
of them.
done, though. We got
Oh, yeah.
significant property tax relief.
Guns.
We got rid of deadly gun-free zones, and that's exactly what they are. I know that sounds like a talking point, but those are killing zones. We just saw that in Dallas and in Florida recently too.
Yeah.
We got through bills that prohibited discrimination in institutions. Now, people call that anti-DEI, and they say, well, you guys are against diversity. You're against including people. No, actually, we're for diversity and including
Exactly.
people, which is what that bill was saying. You can't kick people out because they're the
Right.
wrong race. You can't tell people to be quiet because they're the wrong sex. So that was all about equal treatment. We had some great bills go through, and the whole narrative that they can't govern,
Yeah, that's bull crap.
completely riddled with holes. It looks like Swiss cheese. The side that tried that knows that. So they've taken plan B now, say, well, they govern, but it was from a national viewpoint.
Right.
They got rid of Wyoming gun-free zones, and they lowered Wyoming taxes, and they prohibited Wyoming institutions from discriminating. So those are national issues.
Obviously they are. And that argument's just so stupid anyway. Those folks that are making that, they're the same people that would look at a cure from cancer from Illinois and say, we have to have our own cure from cancer.
I think I said that on your show,
There
talking
you
about
go.
like if it came from Tennessee.
Yeah.
Just like I said, we've got to. I understand Tennessee's got a cure for cancer, but we need Wyoming cures
solutions
for Wyoming cancer.
Exactly right. Absolutely ridiculous. Well, so I want to move on. And, the president had an Easter greeting that I think we should opine about. Let me just read a little bit of it to you. And I quote from the Daily Wire, "Happy Easter to all, including the radical left lunatics who are fighting and scheming so hard to bring murderers, drug lords, dangerous prisoners, and mentally insane, as well as MS-13 gang members. Welcome back to our country. Happy Easter also to the weak and ineffective judges and law enforcement." And he goes on and on. So first, let's just go around the table and get a reaction from everybody.
Well, can you go first? Because there's something I want to pull up here.
So happy Easter to all of the radical left lunatics, Lou.
It always seems like, what was it, the president last time, Biden, out on Easter last year, he comes out with, this is
Transgender Day of Visibility.
Yeah, Day of Visibility. I think there's just a little bit of pushback there, a little bit of you. Now, how do you like it?
Exactly right.
I think it's right in line with what he had said about Americans for Prosperity. We didn't talk about this before, but this comes out shortly after Trump says Americans for no prosperity, dumb as a rock John Bolton, bird brain Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, disloyal warmongers Dick Cheney and his psycho daughter Liz, Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, General with a question mark, Mark Milley, James Mattis, Mark Esper, and others suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. So he's like, please don't send any of these people to my administration. So AFP basically torpedoed my chance to work for the Trump administration.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll work on that.
I wasn't planning on it anyway. I love living in Wyoming. I don't ever want to be in D.C.
Well, we could be like Cyrus Western and, head the EPA for this region.
He's in Colorado. I left Colorado for a reason.
Well, I'm glad he actually went home. I mean, there was some rumor that that's where he was living anyway.
Hey, listen, whether you agree with Cyrus or not politically, it's still a good thing for Wyoming to have him in a position of power like that, working for the Trump administration in this region. So I was happy to hear he got the job. So congratulations to him.
All right. So last thing on the agenda, and we might go a little bit over today, but I meant to ask about the judge's ruling on and I forget the bill number, but basically it was the regulation of abortion clinics. Now we have a judge putting an injunction against that, saying that the Casper baby killing factory can continue killing babies regardless of any sort of regulations until this case plays out.
Did they roll two bills together, the ultrasound one and the regulation on the clinic?
I'm not sure.
I think both of those got held up.
Oh, probably. I mean, that's been the modus operandi of the judicial branch in Wyoming. So apparently now we can't even regulate abortion clinics. We can't talk about safety, can't talk about any of that. So we have to have an injunction. What do you guys think?
We went into great detail already what I think about the injunction on the ultrasound bill.
Right.
That one doesn't surprise me based on we've got a ruling already on abortion in general.
Several of them.
Yeah, right. But as far as regulations go on a surgical center, that if you do surgery, you have to be licensed as a surgical center. I voted for that one. And some people say, well, you're targeting the abortion industry and you're not doing this to other places that might like do oral surgery at a dentist's office or something like that. And to that point, I make no bones about it. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't see infanticide as a legitimate enterprise.
Well, and if you want to go get a haircut, you have to have it cut by a licensed cosmetologist or barber.
Which I think is ridiculous, actually.
I do too, but it's a good example. We have regulations on stylists. Why can't we have regulations on baby killers?
We need to have more regulations on judges, I think. I get really tired of the injunction mentality because judges, frankly, aren't elected. Exactly. Yeah, we vote for retention, but how many people know a thing about any of those judges? We have elected representatives of the people, Tom and myself, for example. We go there and we do what we believe the people want. We get reelected. That kind of reinforces that. And then some judge somewhere says, nah, everybody out of the pool, doesn't matter. That's got to be fixed. I mean, we need to get back to 3 co-equal branches.
Well, to go back with my interview with Harriet Hageman, her comment is that, judges really only have jurisdiction over their particular district. They don't have jurisdiction over the entire country.
Right. Nationwide injunctions for ruling in one district. You're right.
Well, we're experiencing kind of the same thing in Wyoming, where you have judges that are making injunctions across the entire state where, as far as the district judges go, we have several different district judges, Teton, Natrona. There's one for Buffalo Sheridan. I think there's one for, for all sorts of different areas of the state. So do those judges have jurisdiction over the entire state?
They probably shouldn't. But the first thing I would like to see, and I think we may talk about this in the legislature, is a little bit more. We have checks and balances. Well, we need another balance. And that would be Senate approval of appointed justices, because the Senate has to approve, like the people who are on the Barbers Board has to be approved by the Senate, but our Supreme Court justices don't. There's something really wrong.
Absolutely.
In fact,
ridiculous.
I was had lunch with a former senator, again, not going to name names, and he gave me a list of all the commissions and boards that have to be approved by the Senate here.
But not the Supreme Court.
Not the judge. Yeah, the judges don't have to be. It's ridiculous. The chief executive could put anybody on there. Well, they're recommended by the Lawyers Association. It's just like, but it's still that they're not responsible to the voters like the Senate is.
Yeah, and the folks that are selecting these candidates for judges, I mean, it's Kate Fox, it's members of the Wyoming Bar, and it's a couple of appointees by the governor. So the Wyoming Bar, they're a bunch of leftists. The appointees that the governor put on there, I think we can make a pretty solid argument that they're definitely left of center. And then you have Kate Fox. Kate Fox has a record of being a very, very left-wing Supreme Court justice. So since there's no confirmation in the Senate, well, then basically the governor gets to put whomever he wants.
But I would look at it this because some people don't like the idea. Some people like the idea of left wing judges on there to hold us crazy far right people in check.
Yeah, radical.
But fascist. Turn it the other way around, though. I think it's fair game to say, what if we had a very Trump-like governor who just started putting a bunch of his sycophants in, who would just go ahead and greenlight everything he wanted to? Then, my friends on the left, wouldn't you want that person to be vetted by the Senate first? Whenever I suggest something, I think, what if my worst nightmare of an executive was in charge? Would I still want this person to have that power? And if the answer is no, I don't want my side to have that power either.
Exactly right. And it's, that's an argument I have, against anybody who, is in favor of doing things like the filibuster. That's a great example, right? It's politically expedient at the moment, but once you're not in power, do you want the other side to be able to do that? Do you want that to happen? A good example in the Wyoming legislature was that rule they did last session, where it took I think they moved it from a majority to a 2/3 to overrule the chair. If I have that right, okay, fine. But do you want the other side to be able to do that too? I mean, is that a power, like you said, that you want to give your opponents?
And those are the questions worth asking before you do something. If it sounds good for my side right now, just flip it over in your head. Look at Bizarro World. What if they were in charge? Would you want them to have that authority? And if the answer is no, walk away from it.
Exactly right. Well, Tom, thank you very much for enjoying the program, for joining the program.
I enjoyed the program. Thank you, David.
For getting up early and joining us down here at the studio. And thank you for listening. Now, before I go, don't hit that music quite yet. I mentioned earlier in the broadcast that we've been working on another podcast, or I have anyway, and it's called Politics Reloaded. It's on Substack, and it's a totally different group of people that, maybe you haven't heard from before. I know, well, a couple of them you have. But it's former Representative Mark Jennings, Dana Jennings, and my pal Josh Jennings, who have put together this show called Politics Reloaded. It's a long-form podcast where we talk about national issues, local issues, state level, whole bunch of stuff. But we sit down for roughly, an hour, 45 minutes, 2 hours, and we just go through all of these things in kind of granular detail. So it's a much more in-depth approach to politics than we're necessarily used to on the show. So anyway, if you want to check it out, it's politicsreloaded.substack.com. Thanks again for listening from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio. I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.